Okay, welcome back for part 2 of the March 20th lecture in classification and indexing. And we're going to talk about the first of the 4 main principles of LCSH, which is uniform and unique subject headings. This is a principle that is common to all controlled vocabularies, and it makes perfect sense. So the basic principle is, first of all, uniform headings. One heading for every concept. You have a subject heading, motion pictures. People could call it different things. Someone might call it cinema. Someone might call it film. Someone movies. A film historian might call it moving pictures. And somebody with a very structured mind might say, I'm looking for feature films - history and criticism. Doesn't matter. All of those terms, if you find them in the subject catalog, will direct you to the authorized heading of motion pictures. So I don't have to look under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different headings to make sure I found everything the library has on motion pictures. I only have to look under the one heading, motion pictures. Makes perfect sense. Similarly, unique headings. Not just one heading for every concept, but one concept for every heading. Monopolies is a word that can be used in a variety of different contexts. So we have actually 3 subject headings. We have the subject heading monopolies, which would apply to the corporate monopolies. And we have monopolies as pertaining to Islamic law and monopolies as pertaining to Jewish law. So when I look for something on corporate monopolies, I only have to look under the one heading monopolies, and I won't have things on Islamic law and Jewish law mixed in with them. So not only do we have a single heading for every concept, but every concept is applied to, but we have only one heading. Oh, sorry, blah, blah, blah. We have only one concept for every heading. So the advantage to that is pretty obvious, in that it allows you, theoretically, to get both high recall and high precision when you're looking with a controlled vocabulary. It gives you high recall in the sense that when you look under a subject heading, you will ideally get everything about that subject. It also gives you high precision in the sense that when you look under a subject heading, you will ideally get only those materials that are about that subject. So you have high recall in the sense that you get everything the library has, and you have high precision in the sense that everything you get is relevant. So with these rampant advantages, are there any problems? Well, yes, there are. One of them I put in simply out of a sense of my own wistfulness. As a Cole Porter fan, I've always loved the way in which mischievous songwriters do crazy things to language. This verse I've started seems to me the tin pan antithesis of melody. I've always loved that line, and I've loved it because it's the language is ambiguous. Tin pan and antithesis are brought together. Language, when it's used figuratively and imaginatively, does crazy things. It plays on rhyme, it plays on pun, it plays on all kinds of accidental ambiguities and accidental collisions that make the language fun. When you go to controlled vocabularies, essentially you're entering a no fun zone. We are not going to deal with ambiguity. We are not going to take clever little overlaps like tin pan antithesis. We're going to separate them out, and we're going to give each one of them its own heading. I feel a little sad about that, a little wistful. But if by doing so it makes it easier for me to get hold of the complete lyrics of Cole Porter, it's something I can live with. So that's just a minor little thing. Bigger problem is the problem of choice of term. It's all very well to say we're going to have only one heading for each concept, but what heading do you actually choose out of the wealth of headings that are available to you? That tends to be a problem, partly because even with the best of intentions, we may end up applying a subject heading which is objectionable to somebody else. And we may end up entering something that is inaccurate or is archaic, and it bothers people, and you end up having to change it. So the choice of the term can be complex. It's also a problem in the fact that we have the power to choose these terms. The language of authority control is a very power-centered language. We talk about authorized headings, we talk about hierarchical force, we talk about preferred authorized headings, good headings. And as Hope Olson has said in The Power to Name, there is something very powerful about being able to name what something is going to be called. And there are people who find it offensive. Not just people who object to the choice of terms, but media scholars like Clay Shirky have expressed objection over the idea that anybody can presume to tell him or tell anybody this is the term that you should ideally use to search this subject. Who are you to tell me that? He argues. And so it sometimes looks as though by using controlled vocabularies and by arbitrarily announcing that Indians of North America will be the preferred term that we use, that we are playing some kind of petty power game and that we are forcing upon users a nomenclature that doesn't come naturally to them. And it's surprising how sensitive we all can be to being told not to use a word. If you think back to the times when you've been told not to use a word, there are times when we have deliberately used words that we know are taboo, but there are also times when we've used a word in utter innocence and been tripped up on it, and it can be hurtful, and it can be jarring, and it can be painful, and it's not something that one does lightly. So by simply adopting a controlled vocabulary, we are bringing ourselves in line for that kind of resistance and pushback that comes from people who say, I really don't like being told which words to use and which not to use. Problem number 2, and this is the really practical problem that used to drive me mad when I worked in libraries, is explaining the choice of the term. You want stuff on motion pictures. Fine. Here we go. We look up motion pictures in the Library of Congress subject headings, and what do we find? Well, we find this little paragraph, which is called a scope note. Here are entered works on motion pictures themselves, including motion pictures as an art form, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's take that apart as we did the last one. Here are entered works on motion pictures themselves, including motion pictures as an art form, copywriting, distribution, editing, plots, production, etc. So, if you want stuff on movies that treats them as an art form and talks about their copywriting, distribution, editing, plots, etc., this is the term you use. Works about the technical aspects of making motion pictures and their projection onto a screen are entered under cinematography. So if you're talking about motion pictures as an art form, you use motion pictures. If you're talking about motion pictures from their technical aspects, that's entered under cinematography. Okay, that can cause some difficulties. Since when does cinematography have nothing to do with motion pictures as an art form, for instance? Let's see if I can I get rid of myself here? Yeah. Works about the technical aspects of making video recordings, such as creating and storing moving images in electronic form and displaying them on an electronic display, are called video recording. So books about making Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut as a film are under motion pictures. Works about putting that onto a DVD are under video recording. And then works about the artistic aspects of making video recordings are entered under video recordings, production, and direction. As you can see, a lot of us come into the library thinking motion pictures, that's an easy idea, that's something obvious, that's accessible, great. You or the catalog, one of you, have to tell users that this simple term that they were using does in fact split up into a variety of terms, and you have to be able to figure out your information need to figure out which one they go under. And that's a lot to absorb. And it's putting a lot on the information intermediary, either the human or the catalog. And it's rife in the Library of Congress subject headings. Imagine you're on a reference desk and you have a very imperious patron with very little time coming up to you and saying, I need stuff on books and reading for children. And you look up and you find there's a heading, Children, Books and Reading. Here are entered reading interests of children or books recommended for children. Collections of literary works or individual literary works written by children under 15 years of age are entered under children's writings. Works on child authors as class of persons are entered under child authors. Collections of works published for children, including literary works, non-literary works, or both, are entered under children's literature. Works on books for children considered as physical objects are entered under children's books. Okay, now try reading that and absorbing that when you're sitting at a reference desk with an impatient patron rapping the fingernails on the desk 2 inches away from your nose. Or, better still, imagine trying to read that scope note when a class visit has come pouring into your children's section and you have all these children who are looking for things, and the teacher wants some help in guiding them to various things, and you are trying to figure this out. It's enormously complex, far more complex than is easy to handle under stressful circumstances. So this idea of unique headings, uniform and unique headings, is a good idea and very, very useful, and it's key to a lot of our subject access principles. At the same time, it's very, very difficult because information is difficult, and you cannot get rid of the information, the complexity, simply by telling people that you're only allowed to use one term. So that is that for this section, and I will carry on with part 3.